Spied on, wiretapped, and followed by the late Teamster boss, Jimmy Hoffa, all the way to Marlilyn's bedroom. Hoffa's own lawyer breaks a 30-year silence on the secret bugging of Bobby and Marlilyn. That story, right after this. That history has recorded more than once. An affair reported to have been monitored by the FBI and Kennedy's archenemy, the late Teamster boss, Jimmy Hoffa. Until now, the knowledge of Hoffa's spying on Bobby and Marlilyn was sketchy. But tonight, our David Lee Miller talks to Hoffa's own longtime attorney, William Bufalino. Bufalino said he wanted to clear the air, but with details of bedroom tapes, he left it a bit more soiled. Here's David Lee's report.
Marlilyn Monroe, a probable suicide, 1962. Robert Kennedy, assassinated, 1968. Jimmy Hoffa, presumed murdered, 1975. Now, more than a quarter of a century since these three lives were first intertwined, this man, Bill Bufalino, Jimmy Hoffa's personal attorney, has broken his silence about the shocking details of how he, at the request of the former Teamster boss, bugged then Attorney General Robert Kennedy at the home of Kennedy's secret lover, film star Marlilyn Monroe.
I checked on the entire Kennedy family. I had a complete file, and I had Bobby Kennedy surveilled by wiretaps.
It is a story that has become front-page news and the subject of FBI files. But never before has Jimmy Hoffa's right-hand man disclosed the most intimate details of Hoffa's hatred for Robert Kennedy. Now at age 72 and with his health failing, Detroit-based attorney Bill Bufalino wants to set the record straight and agreed to come clean during an interview recorded last week at his retirement home in Pompano Beach, Florida. What did Jimmy Hoffa think of Bobby Kennedy? What did he tell you about him?
That he was a spoiled brat, that he didn't know what it was to do a day's work in his life, that he was hungry for power.
To this day, Bufalino, or Buff, as Hoffa used to call him, remembers the Senate hearings in the late 1950s investigating the alleged infiltration of organized crime into the Teamsters.
Mr. Senator, I don't intend to be boxed in on a play of words.
The committee's chief counsel was Robert Kennedy, and with the support of committee member Senator John Kennedy, brother Bobby repeatedly attacked not only Bufalino, but the brash attorney's friend and boss, Jimmy Hoffa.
Did you say that SOB, I'll break his back, to anyone? Did you make that statement after these people testified before the committee?
I never talked to either one of them after testifying.
No, I'm not talking about to them. Did you make that statement here in the hearing room after the testimony was finished?
Not concerning them, far as I know of.
Well, who did you make it about?
I don't know. I may have been discussing somebody in a figure of speech.
Well, who did you make the statement? Whose back were you going to break?
I don't even remember it.
Well, whose back were you going to break, Mr. Hoffa?
Figure of his speech, I don't even know who I was talking about, and I don't know what you're talking about.
It was during these hearings that Jimmy Hoffa and Robert Kennedy became bitter enemies. Their venomous debate and relationship later became the subject of the TV movie, aptly titled Blood Feud.
Well, whose back are you going to break, Mr. Hoffa?
I don't know. I don't remember.
Whose back, Mr. Hoffa?
I don't know. It's a figure of speech. You understand? Figure of speech, figure of speech.
But the hostility between two of the most powerful men in the country went much further than what was portrayed in a TV movie. Once Kennedy was appointed Attorney General, he made Hoffa's conviction his first priority.
Robert Kennedy has been appointed to President Kennedy's staff. Do you expect the Office of Attorney General to be leaning on you?
No comment. I have a case in court.
Hoffa, as head of the country's largest and most powerful union, was accused by Kennedy of allowing the mob to control the Teamsters and its immense multi-million-dollar pension fund. As Attorney General, Kennedy made Hoffa's life a nightmare, repeatedly indicting the union boss. Finally, an angry and frustrated Jimmy Hoffa struck back with the help of his longtime friend and attorney, Bill Bufalino. You were Jimmy Hoffa's right-hand man. Robert Kennedy is making Jimmy Hoffa's life miserable. What does he ask you to do?
Sue the bastard.
And you sued him?
I sued him every time he turned around.
Besides suing Robert Kennedy, what else did you do on Jimmy Hoffa's behalf?
I had him surveilled for at least 2 years.
According to Bufalino, during the surveillance, he and Hoffa learned that Marlilyn Monroe, who already had an affair with President John Kennedy, was now intimately involved with his brother Robert. Bufalino says he then contacted this man, a professional wiretapper named Bernie Spindell. Although it was 30 years ago, now, for the first time, Bufalino admits that he, at the request of Jimmy Hoffa, arranged to bug the Attorney General of the United States. To what extent did Bernie Spindell eavesdrop on Marlilyn Monroe and Robert Kennedy? What did he do?
He bugged the phone at the junction box. They picked the locks. He and his crew picked the locks to her apartment, and they bugged certain areas, including a nightstand, the bed spring, or under the bed.
Under the bed itself?
Under the bed.
There was a bug?
Yeah.
Under Marlilyn Monroe's
transmitter. And the receivers were outside the building. Outside, probably down where the junction box was. Somewhere. It wasn't there. They were all outside of her apartment. So he didn't have to even remove them.
How much did you pay Bernie Spindell to do this?
$17,000, and once or twice, $5,000 each.
So Bernie Spindell is bugging Marlilyn Monroe's home, and he is eavesdropping on conversations between Marlilyn Monroe and Robert Kennedy. What type of things did he tape? What type of conversations? What was said?
Well, there's one time Bobby Kennedy was complaining about Marlilyn Monroe keeping a diary. And he read the diary. And there was something in there concerning what happened between them. And he blew his top. Bobby Kennedy blew his top. He said, what the hell are you words to this effect, what the hell are you keeping this? They serve no worthy purpose. Keep it in your mind. And then he had, Bobby Kennedy was the one making veiled promises that she could find her way to Washington, D.C., either the White House or Washington.
He said this to Marlilyn Monroe.
Yeah.
While you guys were rolling audio tape.
Yeah, yeah. That's right.
What else went on with Marlilyn Monroe? Was the relationship just platonic? Were they lovers? What did you learn?
I thought Jack Kennedy decided she was a good act, and we ought to keep it in the family, Bobby. Take a shot at her.
They were lovers.
I guess you'd call them lovers for the time being. He could make any kind of promise when the act is in progress.
Is there any doubt in your mind that it was really Marlilyn Monroe and Robert Kennedy who were recorded on this tape?
Absolutely none.
How can you be so sure?
I recognize his voice.
To this day, Bill Bufalino still takes a great deal of pleasure in bashing the Kennedys. But according to investigative writer Dan Moldea, the author of The Hoffa Wars, Bufalino's boast about wiretapping the Attorney General is more than likely all too true.
If there was an attempt to blackmail the White House, Bill Bufalino certainly would have been in a position to have made such an arrangement. He was clearly in a position, he was clearly close enough to Hoffa where he could have done such a thing.
According to Bufalino, wiretapper Spindell never turned the tapes over to Jimmy Hoffa. Bufalino claims Spindell wanted too much money for the secret recordings and says years later, during a police raid of Spindell's home, orchestrated by Robert Kennedy, the tapes were confiscated and later destroyed. If Jimmy Hoffa ever got his hands on these tapes, what was he going to do with them?
He would try to get to Bobby Kennedy to keep him out of jail. He wouldn't want to embarrass him. He wasn't that kind of a man. He wouldn't want to. He just wanted to stay out of prison and do his job.
What do you say to people watching this interview who revere Robert Kennedy and say you did a terrible thing to a great man?
I say to them, I, Bill Bufalino, owe it to you, the general public, to tell it all. I want the truth known, come hell or high water.
Well, that's interesting, David Lee, but why would he wait 30 years if he wanted the public to know? He could have done it right after Hoffa supposedly disappeared in 1975. Why now?
That's very true. Now, for a long time now, Bufalino has wanted to write his memoirs, but at this point in time, he appears to be very ill, and I think he took this as a special opportunity to get a lot of things off his chest. And you better believe, Maury, no matter what you or I may think, he has no regrets.
All right. Thank you very much, David Lee Miller.